Falwell and LaHaye both view nuclear war as a hopeful event, for it will bring about the second coming of Jesus Christ, and both of them portray Christ as a very vengeful, wrathful person toward anyone who doesn't share their ideology. In Falwell's book, he says that Christ will take out his wrath on non-believers. He will crush them beneath his thumb. An article appeared in First Things, a journal of religion and public life, that talks about the role of government as God's avenger. Government derives its moral authority from God. It is the minister of God with powers to avenge, to execute wrath, including even wrath by the sword. Who was the author of that article? Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia. This article was about the death penalty. Scalia wrote, "Indeed, it seems to me that the more Christian a country is, the less likely it is to regard the death penalty as immoral," and the emphasis is his. Dominion theologians emphasize the Gospel of Matthew from the New Testament, where Christ tells his disciples, "Go therefore and make disciples of all the nations." This section of Matthew is called the Great Commission. The Great Commission has come up in speeches to audiences who appreciate its significance, such as the Religious Broadcasters Association. Broadcasting is more than a job for you. It is a great commission. That speech to the Religious Broadcasters Convention was made by our president. When speaking to cardinals, bishops, and Catholic leaders in the East Room of the White House, he said, "All of you are part of the Great Commission." George Grant is a Dominionist author and educator. He was executive director of Coral Ridge Ministries for many years. He wrote in The Changing of the Guard, Biblical Principles for Political Action. Christians have an obligation, a mandate, a commission, a holy responsibility to reclaim the land for Jesus Christ, to have dominion in civil structures, just as in every other aspect of life and godliness. It is dominion we are after, not just a voice. It is dominion we are after, not just influence. It is dominion we are after, not just equal time. It is dominion we are after, world conquest. That's what Christ has commissioned us to accomplish. There's a major roadblock for those wanting to take dominion over the U.S. government, and that's the U.S. Constitution. The man considered to be the father of the Constitution, James Madison, wrote, "Strongly guarded is the separation between religion and government in the Constitution of the United States." Another founding father, Thomas Jefferson, went on to become this country's third president. He used the metaphor wall of separation between church and state to explain the meaning of the First Amendment. In order for dominionists to fulfill their Great Commission, Jefferson's wall must come down, and they're working hard at it. There have been some outrageous bills introduced into Congress in this last session, but the Constitution Restoration Act takes the prize. The Constitution Restoration Act was introduced into both houses of Congress on February 11, 2004. It includes the acknowledgement of God as the sovereign source of law. This is important because God is never mentioned in the U.S. Constitution. The framers of the Constitution wrote a secular document, or a godless constitution, as scholars call it. So the acknowledgement that God is the sovereign source of law is a big departure from the intentions of our founding fathers. The Constitution Restoration Act threatens with impeachment and conviction any judge who dares to uphold church-state separation. This has to be one of the most shocking pieces of legislation introduced in a long time. The bill has 39 co-sponsors, and they represent the true hardcore dominionists in Congress. One of the Senate co-sponsors of the bill is Zell Miller, Democrat of Georgia. You may remember Zell Miller as the Democrat who spoke at the Republican convention. Yes, some Democrats in Congress are dominionists, but let's keep a sense of perspective. Look at this graph. The data comes from scorecards produced by the Christian Coalition, an organization founded by Pat Robertson. Republicans are red, Democrats blue. The left side shows you the number of senators that received a 100% scorecard from the Christian Coalition. Those senators voted for bills supported by the Christian Coalition 100% of the time. The right side shows you the number who received a score of 0. Those senators who never once voted with the Christian coalition. The red are Republican, the blue Democrats. You can see that 29 Republicans voted for bills supported by the Christian coalition 100% of the time, and no Democrats. 30 Democrats and no Republicans received scores of 0. A smaller number from both parties are in between. This flyer claims that if people vote Democrat, the Bible will be banned. Look at the address on the envelope. It wasn't sent out by some fringe group. It was sent out by the Republican National Committee. Now I want to show you a comparison of scorecards from the Christian Coalition and from a consortium of environmental groups, the League of Conservation Voters. One represents Dominionism, the other represents the environment. Here are the scorecards for the Senate leadership. The top represents the Republican leadership in the Senate, the bottom the Democratic leadership. The left side tells the position, then the name, state, and then the Christian Coalition scorecard, League of Conservation Voters scorecard. The entire Republican leadership received a score of 100% from Christian Coalition, and scores between 0 and 8% from the League of Conservation Voters. Then go down to the Democrats, and you see the opposite. All except one leader received 0 from Christian Coalition, and most of them received in the 80s and 90s on the environment. There is an absolute correlation. The higher the score from Christian Coalition, the lower the score on the environment, and vice versa. Let's look at how these two same organizations rated the entire House of Representatives in 2001. The Christian Coalition is on your left, League of Conservation Voters on your right. And what do you see? A mirror image. I use the scorecards from 2001 because Christian Coalition hasn't made their latest scorecards public yet. So for an update, we're moving to another organization whose issues are very similar to the Christian Coalition, and that is the Eagle Forum founded by Phyllis Schlafly. These scorecards come from the year 2003. 36 Republicans and 1 Democrat received scorecards of 100%. That one Democrat, Zell Miller. 39 Democrats and no Republicans received ratings of 0. The rest of the senators, a much smaller number, are somewhere in between. This graph represents more than a highly polarized Senate. It reflects a highly polarized society. And the polarization is not between rich and poor, nor is it between religious and non-religious. It's between those who support a separation of church and state and those who don't. And many religious leaders strongly support a separation. The schism in this country is between those who support the secular constitution that the framers wrote and those who are trying to write God into it. The schism is between those who support tolerance and a diversity of beliefs and those who believe there is only one truth and they have a mandate to impose that truth on the rest of the country. And the schism exists among people of faith, even within the same denominations. There's huge splits within denominations. The Texas Republican Party platform offers us a clear articulation of one side of the schism, so we'll be quoting from it during this talk. The Republican Party of Texas affirms that the United States is a Christian nation. On the subject of separation of church and state, House Majority Leader Tom DeLay said at a congressional luncheon, "I don't believe there is a separation of church and state." And Supreme Court Justice Scalia attacked the principle at a Religious Freedom Day rally. The Texas GOP platform pledges to exert its influence to dispel the myth of the separation of church and state.